Welcome to the Wellness Empowerment Project. I'm Trish.
And I'm Julie. We are two nurses exploring holistic healing and wellness practices to empower you to be the leader of your own health.
Join us as we have fun making the weird shit a normal part of your everyday life.
Hello, welcome to the Wellness Empowerment Project. Today we have Sherri Mack with us, and she is a leading force in the burgeoning cannabis industry as a registered nurse, patient advocate, and activist. Sherri is Chief Nursing Officer of Bloom Hemp and co-founder of Holistic Caring and The Green Nurse. She is a 4-time award-winning podcast, The Green Nurse Podcast, sharing compelling stories of healing, educating on how to use plants as medicine, as well as decreasing stigma around using cannabis for healing, health, and wellness. She is here with us today to share her knowledge on how to reach new levels of wellness by safely adding cannabinoids into your lives. So welcome to the show, Sherri. We're so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Patricia. I'm honored to be here and always an honor to speak on this great plant. I call it the most misunderstood plant in the world, for sure.
Sherri, we're so excited to have you on. I'd like to start with hearing a little bit about your own journey. Especially as nurses, a lot of us, we start our path in the hospital, working in the system itself. And what brought you to cannabis and starting to learn about this plant and using this as a modality?
Good question. We all don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be a cannabis nurse, or hey, I'm going to be a psychedelic nurse, or hey, I'm going to write cannabis curriculum, or hey, I'm going to start podcasting on plants. Generally, there's usually a compelling story, and I definitely have a compelling story. So I have been a registered nurse since 1988, graduated from Boston College, and worked in all the big teaching hospitals in Boston. Pediatrics to geriatrics. I've done intensive care unit nursing. I've done critical care nursing, postoperative care. I built a telehealth clinic. I've done pediatrics, hospice, home care, home infusion, etc. I ended up getting sick in 2012 and almost died. So I became a patient on the other side of the bed. I got an infectious disease, and I truly understand what it means to suffer. I understand that patient experience of suffering and not having any answers, being passed off from one clinician, one doctor, one specialty, one pill, one procedure. And before you knew it, at the end of 2 years on my journey of getting sick, I was on over 18 pharmaceuticals. I wasn't getting better. I was sick, I was suffering, and I kept getting more conditions. I was getting more autoimmune conditions. I started off with an infectious disease in my GI tract, wiped out my gut microbiome. And then from there, what ended up happening is my immune system started to fail me. What brought me to cannabis as medicine was really a compelling story. I have always enjoyed cannabis here and there in college. But never really partaked and understood it as medicine because it's not taught in nursing school. It's not taught in medical school yet. So what ended up happening was a 70-year-old nurse colleague friend of mine came to my house. I was on 18 pharmaceuticals. I was a disabled nurse. I had diagnoses up the yin yang. I was on multiple pharmaceuticals, opioids, antidepressants, anti-anxiety agents, steroids, antibiotics, biologics, all kinds of different medicines, and nothing was helping me. So this was a nurse that came to my house. She was 70 years old. She was a nursing professor at a college, and she shared with me cannabis from her garden. And I said to her, why are you bringing me cannabis when I am on the most powerful prescriptions, powerful antibiotics? Nothing is helping me. How could this possibly help for me? And she basically said to me, Sherri, you need to get with the program. She said, it's 2012. Cannabis is now legal in Massachusetts. I was living in Massachusetts at the time as medicine, and you have nothing to lose. And she also disclosed to me that prior to 1937, her father was a pharmacist who actually carried cannabis formulations in his pharmacy. And I never knew this. I never knew that there were over 600 cannabis formulations in the pharmacies prior to 1937. Never knew that. She also disclosed to me, which I had this beautiful transpersonal nursing experience with her, where she became very vulnerable and shared with me her cannabis journey. And she pretty much said, Sherri, I just want to let you know, I've been using cannabis every day since I was 17. My father grew it in the backyard and he was a pharmacist. And she said, I'm not on any pharmaceuticals, and I've never been hospitalized. So I had to look at that. Now, I'm not saying that's for everyone, but it was something that I needed to hear to open up my mind to try something new and different. So basically, she gave me cannabis. And the part that really blew me away was when I inhaled that cannabis, I did not get high. This is what blew me away. I didn't understand. My pain was a 10 out of a 10 that day. Came to my house. I was sick. I was in bed. I really was not functioning very well. And she said, "You had nothing to lose." And she was right. And so I tried it. And my pain went from a 10 to a 0 within 10 minutes. And that was 3 puffs of cannabis from her garden. And literally, I was not impaired. I didn't understand it. It blew me away. I felt like my head cracked open and consciousness poured in. And I said, wow, how could something this fast, this quickly work for me when nothing has worked? That's what led me on the journey to discover cannabis as medicine. That's when I went down the rabbit hole and checked out all kinds of books and started reading and started learning. I got my medical card. And I literally, when I went to the dispensary after getting my medical card and buying all these products, and I sat down and said, gosh, if I can figure this out, you can call me the green nurse. And literally, here we are 10 years later, 11 years later, 10 plus years later, I am one of my names is I go by the green nurse. The green nurse is a nurse that teaches on the endocannabinoid system and the safe utilization of cannabis as medicine. I was introduced to it by another nurse, by her sharing history, her sharing her journey, and her saying, "You've got nothing to lose." And she was right. And I'm so grateful for that experience. What I take now is much different than what I took back then. I don't need as much because I'm a completely different person. As we know, we're made up of 330 trillion cells, and we're constantly reproducing cells in our body. Basically, my endocannabinoid system, which we'll talk about, has been nuanced in such a way that has allowed me to heal and come off of all of those pharmaceuticals. I am now pharmaceutical free.
That's an amazing story. I have to tell you that going into this podcast, I wasn't really sure what to expect. That is because I'm coming from a place of ignorance. As a nurse, I've been a nurse for 27 years now, I think. Not counting too far, but about 27 years. And I have not learned about the endocannabinoid system. I'm here, open, ready to learn. That's really a fascinating story to me. Just being here with you today, you are a vibrant, healthy person talking to us. And to think that where you are today, it sounds like you were in such a different place when she came to visit you. Can you talk to us, or let's dive into the endocannabinoid system?
Yeah.
Because I think that we really have to start with, what is that? Why haven't we learned about it? And let's just go there, because I could spin off a million questions.
I can tell you the reason why we haven't learned about it has to do with prohibition. And when you really look at the history of it, cannabis was approved as a medicine prior to 1937. And it was the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act that prohibited cannabis. And literally, it had to do with a lot of different other organizations. So think of alcohol industry, tobacco industry, pharmaceutical industry, food industry, and the paper industry. Cannabis and hemp are pretty much the same thing. The only difference is a lab value. Cannabis has greater than 0.3% THC. Hemp has less than 0.3% THC. And it can be used as food, fiber, fuel, textiles, medicine, clothing, rope, hempcrete. Henry Ford's first car was built out of hemp. The Declaration of Independence was signed on hemp. There was an interest in prohibiting that. The American Medical Association actually approved of cannabis as medicine because there were over 600 formulations in the pharmaceutical companies. Some companies known as Eli, Merck, Eli, Lilly, lots of these other older pharmaceutical companies. It was taken out. It was replaced. The prohibition had to do a lot with racism, had to do with corporate greed, and it just progressed over the years. Fast forward, the endocannabinoid system was actually discovered in the 80s, just recently. So THC was isolated by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam. So THC is that molecule that gets people impaired at high doses. At low doses, it actually nuances this system called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system was discovered because they wanted to figure out why people were getting high. They injected a person with synthetic THC, put them in an MRI machine, and basically we lit up like a Christmas tree. We have cannabinoid receptors on all of the cell surfaces of all of our 11 organ systems. We have cannabinoid receptors at all of the neurotransmitter signaling junction sites. That's very powerful. We make molecules in our body very similar to the plant. We have an endocannabinoid system not because of the cannabis plant, but because we make molecules very similar to the plant. The plant makes THC, we make a molecule called anandamide and 2-AG, and the molecular structure is very similar and plugs into those receptors. Again, the endocannabinoid system is the master regulatory system that regulates all 11 organ systems, our immune system, and all of the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell our body to either do something or not do something. Simplify it a little bit further. The endocannabinoid system signals both the fight or flight response and the relaxation response. We cannot control the fight or flight response. It is something that happens automatically. The relaxation response requires conscious awareness and practice and can be nuanced multiple different ways. Mind-body medicine, meditation practices, there's the holistic modalities, and then cannabinoids. The endocannabinoid system can be modulated with or without cannabis. And as nurses, as clinicians, we have a responsibility to know what things can make the endocannabinoid system work better and what things don't. If we're health professionals that are prescribers and we're prescribing pharmaceuticals and prescribing therapies and prescribing all of these things, if it doesn't support and nourish this most important system, what are other things that we can tell our patients to do to mitigate, to prevent what we call an endocannabinoid deficiency? I truly believe, for me personally with my illness, that I had a severe endocannabinoid deficiency because my microbiome was wiped out. And then there's another term called the endocannabinoid dome. The endocannabinoid dome is the larger environment that interacts with the endocannabinoid system, the lipid dome, the microbiome, and all the other neurotransmitter signaling systems. So it's really important for people to understand the endocannabinoid system is like a sensing system. If things are out of whack, endocannabinoids get released to give messages to generally dial things down because we're generally running, I'd say, hot most of the time. And I can give an example. For example, you stub your toe or you cut your knee. The endocannabinoid system switches on to release these endocannabinoids upon demand to signal other neurotransmitters, to release cytokines, to release red blood cells and white blood cells to go to the area to clean up. We release the inflammatory cytokines. That's normal. That's the normal body. But when the danger is over, the endocannabinoid system says, oh, I'm good. I'm going to shut that down, and it brings us back into balance. So the endocannabinoid system is a switchboard operator, I like to say, going on and off all day long because it controls eat, sleep, relax, forget, protect. That's a phrase that was coined by Dr. Vincent DiMarzo, who was a big researcher on the endocannabinoid system. It controls all of these autonomic processes with or without us even knowing it. So if we have an endocannabinoid deficiency, what does that look like? It looks like disease. It looks like symptoms if our body isn't able to get back into balance. The plant phytocannabinoids, so cannabinoids are molecules that interact with the endocannabinoid system. There's a lot of different types of cannabinoids. We have internal endogenous cannabinoids that we make, plant phytocannabinoids that the plant makes, and then synthetic cannabinoids that the pharmaceutical company makes. I'm not sure if you all know that, but Marinol was invented in the 80s for refractory nausea and vomiting. And that Marinol is synthetic THC. Epidiolex was created for Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and Dravet syndrome, rare pediatric seizure disorders. This is a type of purified CBD. So we have three different types of cannabinoids: endocannabinoids we make, plant phytocannabinoids the plant makes, and then the synthetic cannabinoids that the pharmaceutical companies makes, all interacting with this system. The goal of taking cannabis as medicine is to take the lowest dose to get the most therapeutic response below the threshold of being impaired. And this can be done very safely. Over the course of years, this is what brought me into it. I couldn't go back to work at the hospital anymore. I was using cannabis as medicine. And as nurses, that's a no. They'd take me back on all my pharmaceuticals. They didn't have a problem with that, but they won't take me back using cannabis as medicine. So I had to reinvent myself and do something different. And I'll tell you, when I got my medical cannabis card and I went to the doctor, he said, "Yeah, you definitely qualify." I said, "Okay, now what?" And you know what he said to me? "Good luck, kid." That good luck, kid, was what I needed to hear to propel me to do something, because I'm like, I know that I am not the only one. I am a nurse. I'm a holistic nurse. I've done nursing for 25 years at that time. And literally, I knew that if I was asking for help and I got a good luck kid, that there was a lot of other people out there that also had a lot of questions. That's why I made it my life's purpose to form the Green Nurse, merge with Holistic Caring and the Green Nurse, and to teach on the endocannabinoid system and the most misunderstood plant in the world.
Wow. That is a ton of information. You answered a lot of the questions that I wanted to even dive into, which actually leads me to go back about a year ago. I actually took maybe a 2-hour class on cannabis. The one thing that I still remember to this day is that they said there were some new laws in place saying that the endocannabinoid system is supposed to be taught in nursing schools, and that less than 1% have actually implemented it thus far. Now, I do know from some other colleagues of mine that work in nurse schools that it isn't being, even the nervous system and the vagus nerve with polyvagal theory and all that information that's come out, with that helping us learn how to regulate our nervous system and how that affects our GI tract, and even our intuition and coherence aren't being talked about either. And it sounds like they're also very directly linked. I'd love to hear from you the history and where things are right now on this starting to be integrated into the field of study of nursing. And why do you think that despite us, it sounds like making some moves, things are not further along?
I'll say things aren't further along for the primary reason that cannabis is still considered to be a Schedule 1. We have laws that are across various states that are not in coherence. You said that word, coherence, and there is no coherence from state to state. There's patchwork laws. You have the federal government, and then you have every state that's able to determine how they want to make their rulings on cannabis. But what ended up happening this year, and it actually started last year, the Health and Human Services actually petitioned the DEA to reschedule cannabis. On December 2nd of this year, there is going to be a rescheduling hearing. They're looking to reschedule it to Schedule 3, which puts it in the same category as Tylenol 3, ketamines, and steroids, et cetera. As a cannabis nurse in doing this, I feel that it should be fully descheduled so we can study it. But I think that is the primary reason why. And I'll give you another reason why I was training. I was actually training a holistic functional health doctor. As nurses, doctors are starting to really play a part in it. And I trained a doctor, went through all of this. He was going to open up his own little clinic. And then what ended up happening was he wanted to do medical cards and education, is that they said that if he opened up a clinic, he would lose his Medicare prescribing rights. That's huge. So that's just on that front. So let's get back to nursing. Nurses are truly the game changers in this industry for sure. In 2018, the National Council State Boards of Nursing put out in a 64-page document of the Journal of Nursing Regulation. It was an amazing document. There's a PDF that you can Google online. It's a 64-page. And basically, it outlines cannabis nursing and that nurses must have 6 essential areas of knowledge when it comes to cannabis as medicine. I'll tell you, my favorite one is the number 6. The nurse shall not judge the patient. That's right there in the thing. The nurse shall not judge the patient on their preferred treatment modality for whatever they're looking to treat. So that was really enhancing. When this came out in 2018, I took it upon myself to really start teaching on that. And that's when I started my podcast, to really get out there and to share that the National Council State Boards of Nursing is real. This is the Nursing Regulatory Board that puts on the nursing exam, and they haven't taken it any further than that. The 64-page document of Nursing Journal of Nursing Regulation, the NCSB guidelines, have been out since 2018, but nothing has happened with the NCSBN since then. But the American Nurses Association, which represents 5 million nurses, just recognized cannabis nursing as a specialty. Last year, September 27th, 2023, they made a huge announcement. Cannabis nursing has been recognized as a specialty. There's a great article that's written on that. They did this in conjunction with the American Cannabis Nurses Association. So the American Cannabis Nurses Association is an affiliate of the American Nurses Association, and they recognize cannabis nursing as a specialty. Over the past 3 years, the American Cannabis Nurses Association has been writing a book called Scope and Standards of Nursing, and it was just published this year in conjunction with the ANA. The American Cannabis Nurses Association co-published a book with the American Nurses Association called The Scope and Standards of Nursing. It's the who, what, when, where, why of cannabis nursing, and it outlines scope and standards for registered nurses, master's prepared nurses, and advanced practice nurses. And it looks at different competencies, and it's really a beautifully written book. The lead writer on that is Dr. Deanna Summers. I want to give a shout out to her. She spent countless hours writing, rewriting, and editing that book. And that book is amazing. We're actually written in that book. So that's the part that's really cool. Holistic Caring and the Green Nurse is written in that book to be able to teach to the scope and standards. And also my business partner, Elizabeth Mack's book, Cannabis for Health, Become a Coach, was also written about in that book. Cannabis nursing, we still have, I think once we start to see laws change on the federal level, I think it's going to be more accepted. But that hasn't stopped us from doing what we're doing, because as you don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to become a cannabis nurse, is usually a compelling story. And knowing what this plant has done for me and the 6,000 patients that I've taken care of over the past 10 years is mind-boggling. I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm definitely an advocate. I'm an activist, a podcaster, very passionate about this plant and very passionate that all people should know about this. And particularly, even if you don't believe in cannabis, or even if you have a stigma or a bias around cannabis as medicine, you can't deny the endocannabinoid system. You can't deny the fact that we have a system in our body where we make molecules in our body very similar to the plant, and how it's nuanced. And the endocannabinoid system can truly help us to regulate and correct cell signaling and to keep us in homeostasis and balance. And I'm the picture perfect example of that. And I truly believe that if doctors and nurses knew about this, I wouldn't have suffered as long as I have. That's why I'm so passionate about what I do, to relieve suffering and improve quality of life.
You mentioned having endocannabinoid. I can't say that word very well, so I'm going to apologize every time I say it. But
Yeah,
it sounds like we're going to say it a lot.
Yes.
I want to talk about deficiency. And you said
Yeah.
what deficiency looks like is disease. Can you lay that out more in terms of symptoms? How does somebody know that they have a deficiency, and whether they should be doing things to increase their endogenous, or if they should be reaching out for plants or something along those lines? Can you get into that?
Yeah, I can, because I have a beautiful slide that I created on all of the things that can nourish and support the endocannabinoid system. And I literally did them all and nothing worked. When we talk about, so we have an endocannabinoid system, it's made up of enzymes that create the endocannabinoids upon demand. We also create receptors. We have CB1 and CB2 receptors on all of the cell surfaces of all of our organ systems and on our neurotransmitter signaling junction sites. When we have a diseased body, our body is actually producing cannabinoid receptors, actually looking for the endocannabinoids that we make to plug in to do something. So if we're not making enough of our own endocannabinoids, anandamide, so ananda is the Sanskrit word for bliss, and 2-AG is another one. If we're not making enough of our own, then messages downstream don't happen. And there's a reason why we don't make enough of our own. And I'm going to bottom line it here. It all has to do with lifestyle. The immune system plays a huge part in it. Genetics plays a huge part in it. Age. As we get older, Our endocannabinoid system is matured by the time we're 25, and it's lifestyle. So everything that we do or don't do in our lives affects our endocannabinoid system. So I want you to think of these things. Diet is probably the number one. Fast food, fried food, fake food, artificial flavors, artificial coloring, trans fat, hydrogenated oils, high fructose corn syrup, sugar, all have a negative impact on the endocannabinoid system. Alcohol. The minute you take alcohol into your body, I'm sorry, there is no therapeutic use of alcohol whatsoever. Alcohol actually causes probably the biggest, hugest endocannabinoid deficiency in the body. It depletes our body of all kinds of nutrients, specifically B vitamins, and B vitamins bathe the central nervous system. Pharmaceuticals. Not all, I'm not anti-pharmaceutical, but a lot of pharmaceuticals that people don't know about. I encourage you, the viewers that are listening, to get the book Drug Muggers. It's an amazing book. Drug Muggers actually talks about nutraceutical or pharmaceuticals that actually deplete the body of nutrients. So if you're taking more than 5 pharmaceuticals, there's a 50% chance you're having a drug interaction. 10 or more pharmaceuticals is 5 or more pharmaceuticals is polypharmacy. 10 or more pharmaceuticals, if you're taking, 100% chance that they're interacting and not in your best and highest interest. So we already talked about food, we talked about diet, we talked about alcohol, talked about pharmaceuticals. Exercise. Motion is the lotion. People that don't exercise. When you think of the runner's high that people feel, that runner's high is actually the endocannabinoid system. The endorphins are actually being triggered from the anandamide molecule, that bliss-like molecule. Exercise is huge. Promoting good sleep hygiene is huge. So people that don't get good restorative sleep can have an endocannabinoid deficiency. Sleep, exercise, stress, modulating the stress response. How do we handle stress? And how do we, everything, like I said, that we're doing or not doing. Your prayer meditation actually supports the endocannabinoid system. Other things that don't support it is also things that are, basically, it's all the lifestyle things. All of the alcohol, tobacco, not good, cigarette smoking, polypharmacy, the active lack of exercise, overeating, obesity actually contributes to an endocannabinoid deficiency. How do you know? I look at people, I'm like, who's on pharmaceuticals? I can look at pharmaceuticals and what people are taking. Some of the classic things, and Dr. Ethan Russo did an amazing job. He's a scientist and researcher that has been talking about the endocannabinoid system for years. There's 3 conditions that he's written about in particular, and how they are all very similar, but a little bit different. So irritable bowel, migraine headaches, and fibromyalgia. They all exhibit hyperalgesic states. They don't have a clear indication as to what's causing them, but these particular conditions actually respond really well to plant phytocannabinoids. So if the different activities, so what supports and nourishes the endocannabinoid system? A healthy diet, clean water, organic, plant-based. Nutraceuticals actually can support the endocannabinoid system. We make omega-3 fish oils, omega-3s. We need healthy fats. So in taking care of the lipid dome and the microbiome, probiotics, believe it or not, probiotics, omega-3s, turmeric, echinacea, all of these different supplements can support and nourish the endocannabinoid system and help optimize it for it to work appropriately. It's a lot of information. I know it can be a little confusing, but the majority of the diseases that exist, I know for a fact, and things that support it. When I got sick and I was on all those 18 pharmaceuticals, I was also doing massage, chiropractic care, essential oils, aromatherapy, acupuncture, meditation, eating as clean as I could. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking, I was on all those pharmaceuticals that wasn't helping me. But all of those things, nothing worked. My endocannabinoid system was so depleted because my microbiome was wiped out that it really took cannabinoids to help with all of the other therapies. And then once I started taking cannabis and CBD in particular, all of those other things that didn't work as well started to work better. And that's what we see a lot with a lot of patients. So patients will come to us and they'll say, okay, have you tried chiropractic care? Have you tried essential oils? Have you tried aromatherapy? Have you tried energy healing? Have you done Reiki? And we'll go through these lists, the vagal exercises, polyvagal theory, studied that, done that. But if you have a severe endocannabinoid deficiency, and you're not producing enough of your own internal endogenous cannabinoids, oftentimes that is what is needed to wake up that system, to kickstart it, so these other things will start to work again. And that's what happened to me.
Thank you, Sherri. I really just want to highlight that the process you spoke of is really the process that we've all been taught in nursing in general, whereas we start from our least invasive and you work your way to the most invasive. You're like, let's go over, let's make sure we're eating the right things. Let's see what our diet is. Is our stress under control? Is our body under control? Okay, how many medications are we on? And really getting things in order before, as opposed to just saying right away, oh, I just need to start
Cannabis, yeah.
cannabis right now.
Yeah.
It's a process. It's almost like a process of elimination and making sure that we're as tuned up as possible within our own circle of control before we start bringing other supplements, we'll say,
Yeah.
into
Oftentimes, though,
realm.
people will say that they've tried those things and they haven't worked. And so what I say to them
Yeah.
is, let's not take them off the table yet. So let's just say they're not working right now, but they do work. Everything works and nothing works. And we have to figure out for each individual person what works best for you. That's the part that's really hard about cannabis, and why doctors aren't doing it is because the endocannabinoid system is influenced by so many different things, and that our endocannabinoid requirements can change over time as we change. The plant medicine model in taking care of humans is very different than the pharmaceutical model. Pharmaceutical model is a clock, a watch, a pill, a procedure. The plant medicine model is more intuitive in really teaching people about their own bodies, their own smart bodies, and listening to them and doing what they need to do for themselves, and not just handing over their locus of control to another practitioner. And that's what we see over and over. So it's really empowering patients to take their health back and to pay attention to everything that they're doing and not doing. And that's a lot of, that's where journaling comes in. And where when we're working with patients that are starting as cannabis as medicine, I said, I want to know everything that you're doing and not doing, because that's going to help me to be able to fine tune. It's not just about taking more cannabis. That's not the point. The point is you don't need a lot in order for it to influence and nuance the system in a way. And when you pair cannabinoids with these other health and wellness activities that can nourish it, the results are amazing. You can just see people change immediately.
It's about using the cannabis in a way to support the environment in your body to heal.
Yes.
And so basically creating the environment so all those other modalities can be more effective.
Correct.
Absolutely.
So what
love that.
about because cannabis is not regulated in the same way that other medications are, how does a layperson know? Because if you go to one dispensary, you may get a certain amount in this product and go to another dispensary, buy the same type of product, and it has a different level in it. That's where I struggle, because does the layperson actually know, and do the people dispensing actually have the knowledge to advise people of how much is actually in the products that they're selling?
Yes. Dispensaries are highly regulated, more so than the hemp markets. I'm going to be honest. Dispensaries have to jump through hoops to be able to sell their products. Everything needs to be lab tested. Dispensary products, I think, are very safe. They have to be. And they have lab tests. So I always tell people when they are purchasing whatever product they're purchasing is you need to make sure that there is a certificate of analysis by a third party that has tested that product. And that is going to be looking at different cannabinoid profiles, terpenes. You want to know the amount in it, the dosing per serving, as well as are there any contaminants? Are there any residual solvents, et cetera? So looking at lab tests are very important. I think dispensaries are, and like I said, it's state by state. So every state laws are different. In Maryland, they require having a clinician on staff. So every state is different for what their laws have and what they don't have. But the bud tenders aren't supposed to be diagnosing, treating at all. And the bud tenders that are there in the dispensaries are there to sell. So that's the thing. And they're not supposed to be educating. And that's where cannabis nurses and cannabis clinicians come into play to be able to help people to shop at these dispensaries. And that's what we do, is we work with dispensaries. We help people shop at dispensaries to get the good products. And then there's the hemp CBD side of it. Oftentimes dispensaries they carry the high THC products, but they're lacking on the other minor cannabinoids that are very beneficial for patients. So CBD in particular, full spectrum CBD, CBG, CBN, the plan has over, God, like I was talking to Lemire Hannes, who actually discovered the anandamide molecule a couple of years ago, and he said there's over 1,800 components in the cannabis plant. A lot of them haven't even been identified yet, and they all have a therapeutic potential. I'll talk a strain name for now, and we're trying to get away from strain names because strain names have to do with flowers. So those are the cannabis flowers that people purchase and grind up and roll and put in a joint or a bong or a blunt or whatever they do. But there's oils that are different. And the only way you're really going to know what you get is by asking for a lab result. For example, and the strain names are names that are given to these different flowers. It's all depends upon cultivation. So if someone's cultivating Blue Dream, let's say the Blue Dream strain in California, and they're cultivating it in Massachusetts, cultivation of cannabis can grow different. It could be the exact same strain, the exact same genetic, but because of the soil it's grown in, the nutrients it's fed, the lighting, is it grown indoors or outdoors? You're going to have a different medicinal profile. It can change. If someone says, I love Blue Dream, I think it's great, it's the best strain ever, it works for me. If you get 10 Blue Dreams from 10 different dispensaries, you're going to get 10 different effects because the labs aren't going to be the same. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know one of the things that when I ventured into looking to herbalism myself was that based upon where you live, there actually was plants that are able to help with any of the conditions that would happen in the area that you live. Specifically, the honey from bees, great for the allergens, but you want the local honey. And it sounds like it's very similar with cannabis, is that we ideally want it from this one location, from this one space, and not dabbling around into 8 or 9 different places.
Yeah. And everyone thinks that, with cannabis, you have to smoke it. I rarely smoke it anymore. I really don't. I don't need to. That's how I was introduced to it because it's the most common way. It's like a cultural thing. And this was a 70-year-old nurse. This is what she had. Her father was dead and didn't have the formulations in the pharmacy anymore. So she grew her own and she was making her own medicine. She taught me how to extract my own and make my own. So you can grow the plant. That's the other thing too, is that when people that are in legal states can actually cultivate their own. There's laws that exist that allow patients to be able to grow their own medicine. And I've seen the benefits of that. I've worked with families teaching them how to grow, and families that have kids that have epilepsy, families that have kids that are coming off of other drugs. Believe it or not, in a harm reduction approach, growing the cannabis and cultivating together, veterans growing their own, it's expensive. Cannabis is very expensive in dispensaries. Somehow having people grow their own and teaching them how to cultivate and make their own medicine can be very beneficial and can be very therapeutic for healing. And that was part of my journey too. I went to the dispensary, but it got very expensive trying to figure it out. And so I dove into the legacy market and started working with caregivers that were actually making medicine for cancer patients and learned how to cultivate and learned how to extract and learned how to make my own topicals and tinctures and capsules and gummies and edibles. So I could treat myself being cost effective. There's something to be said too. I did an interview with a couple of veterans once, and they just said it was really bizarre how when they were growing their own, it's almost as if the plant knew what they needed. And it's a spirit plant. It's a beautiful, nurturing, feminized plant. Knew what this person needed for medicine and just grew the right amount. People cultivating their plants. You cultivate your own garden, you grow your own food, growing your own medicine. There's something very therapeutic and beautiful about that. And so we work with patients in our practice, meeting them where they're at and actually helping them to develop a plan that's appropriate for them. Some people want to shop at a dispensary. Some people want to have a private caregiver. Some people want to shop online. Some people want to go to the dispensary. Some people want to grow their own. And so that's what we do is we support people on their journey because it's not about me. It's about them and teaching them how they can live their best lives using the information that I've been bestowed upon me. So I share that with them And again, and nuancing that and pairing cannabinoids with other health and wellness activities. It's not just about cannabis. It's not just about CBD. It's not just about taking more. And over time, when we're working with patients, this is important too. I've had a lot of questions about this. Do people need more and more? I'm going to tell you, no, they don't. This is a great story. I took care of a nun, a 70-year-old nun who came to me who had chronic regional pain syndrome. She was misdiagnosed with MS. They put her on all kinds of medications. She fell, had a stroke, woke up, and had chronic regional pain syndrome in all 4 limbs. And I don't know if you all know that, but it is a debilitating disease, extremely high pain rates, hyperalgesia throughout her entire body. She had an internal neurotransmitter stimulator. She was on lidocaine infusions every other week and 400 micrograms of fentanyl. Literally was in bed for 20 out of 24 hours a day. And she was suffering. And so working with her, we got her started on cannabis, mostly CBD, some THC at night. We needed to build up her THC tolerance while she slept because she didn't want to be impaired, but she was having a lot of pain and she was really nervous about being on that much fentanyl. So her doctor started to wean her off of the fentanyl and we started to adjust her cannabis dosing. Over the course of a year and a half, she got off of her fentanyl. And I remember her pulling off, I remember being on the phone with her and her pulling off that last 50 microgram patch and how scared she was that she was going to need a ton of cannabis. And she didn't. That was the part that was wild. She did not need any extra doses of cannabis. So over the course of that year and a half of us nuancing and toning her endocannabinoid system and introducing supplements and eating different and meditating and getting back to nature and doing what she wanted, but still taking the cannabinoids, when she finally took that last fentanyl patch off, her dosing did not need to go up. And oftentimes patients will come to us too. They'll say, gosh, it's not working anymore. And I'm taking more and more. And I go, let's stop. Let's talk about what's working and what's not working. And then we go back to the intake form and we look at all of those different questions on lifestyle of what they're doing. Oh, and 9 times out of 10, people have become so used to cannabis that they neglect their other health and wellness activities. I'm not sleeping so great anymore. Did you stop? I haven't been exercising as much. I'm not meditating anymore. Oh, I started having that soda in the afternoon, right? Before you go to cannabis, it's always about, let's look at everything else that you're doing or not doing and not blame the cannabis. Oftentimes too, people need less. So if someone starts to not sleep very well, I'm like, you're probably taking too much. And that's the thing, is you need to pull back on it a little bit. So it's very, really interesting how everyone's very different, but this plant is very beautiful, very therapeutic, very healing, and has something to offer those that want to use it appropriately. And there is a definition for the therapeutic use of cannabis, and I'll give it to you. So according to the American Cannabis Nurses Association, the therapeutic use of cannabis is the use of cannabis products for medicinal, wellness, and healing purposes. It is personal and subjective to each consumer, with objective criteria being improvement in one of the 5 health domains: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social, without negatively impacting any of the others.
That's an amazing story about the nun.
Yeah.
Especially being on so many different medications. What concerns are there with introducing cannabis with other medications? Are there interactions between those?
Sure. So when we do, I remember I was on 18 pharmaceuticals at one point in time, and I've the most medications. I took care of another nurse who had advanced stage lupus. She was on 40 medications, and that's a lot. But it was interesting. Once she started using cannabis, she found that she could drop them off very quickly, but some of the other ones that she needed. So when we talk about medications and interactions, you got pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. What does the drug do to the body and what does the body do to the drug? So it can be a little bit different. For example, for people that have, and oftentimes cannabis makes pharmaceuticals work better so they can drop dosages very quickly. But there's some interactions, there's some interactions like the cannabinoids get metabolized through the cytochrome P450 system. This is in the liver, and this is what metabolizes a lot of other drugs. And so we don't want to compete for metabolism. So when people are on a lot of pharmaceuticals and they need those pharmaceuticals, it's always take the pharmaceutical first, wait 1 to 2 hours, then take your cannabis if you're taking an oral preparation. whether it be a tincture, a capsule, or a gummy. Inhalation is a little bit different. I'm not a big proponent of inhalation unless it's absolutely necessary. And generally, inhalation is something that we use as needed to help prolong the effect of the tincture, capsule, gummy, or edible. Think about the digestive system as a two train, right? So you want to take your pharmaceutical first, you want to wait. Then if you're taking an oral preparation, you don't want it to compete with the metabolizing enzymes. And so generally those, and there's a lot of pharmaceuticals that are out there today. And the ones that we get particularly nervous about has to do with Coumadin, right? So blood thinners, you don't want to compete. Anything that interacts with grapefruit is probably our safe bet. And some of the other pharmaceuticals that exist that happen as well, like some of the antihypertensives, et cetera. You always want that pharmaceutical in first to be working, hitting those receptors, and then you take your cannabis second. And generally, I haven't seen a lot of side effects because we've worked with protocols, we work with a lot of different patients. Again, it's taking the lowest dose to get the most therapeutic response. And each method of administration is different. Inhalation is very different than taking a tincture, is very different than putting a topical on, is very different than doing a dab or eating a brownie. So it's all very different. And so we work with patients to help them to develop a plan that's in alignment with their belief systems that feels good to them. Again, to take the lowest dose below the threshold of being impaired. For most people, that's what we do.
Sherri, I have two questions for you. One
Sure.
from the nursing side and one from a patient side. If someone's listening to this and they're thinking, what, maybe this is the answer for me, what would be the first couple steps that they would take?
Basically, we do consulting. So we have holisticcaring.com is our website and to learn. So one of the things that we built out is we built out a learning library. If you go to the website at holisticcaring.com, there's a tab that says learn. Learn about the endocannabinoid system. That's the first thing. We have this system, the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is there. We give examples of the endocannabinoid system in action. We have a link for cannabinoids, terpenes, botanicals. So just really learning about it and seeing if it's something that you might want to explore. Then we also, at Bloom Hemp CBD, that's our other company, we have free care plans for people that are new, that are exploring this, that may not want to take a deep dive, that may not want to pay for a consultation. They just may want to just see what happens. What are these nurses are going to tell me? We have a free intake form that asks the past medical history, past surgical history. What medications are you on? How and why are you looking to use cannabis? Do you drink alcohol? Do you smoke? Are you pregnant? Are you nursing? So just the basic intake questions. And then we do a free care plan on Bloom Hemp CBD products. We offer them a consultation if they want to sit down to take a deep dive into what's going on with them and to shop. Generally, when someone is new, and also too, if someone is brand new to cannabis and they've never done it before, you always want to start low and go slow, and also start with something that's non-impairing. So CBD, full spectrum CBD, the minor cannabinoids, CBD, CBG, CBN, those things can nuance the endocannabinoid system before you actually have to even consider or think about taking THC products. There are so many different products on the market and so many different ways to use this plant. And in particular too, for example, I did a presentation on chronic pain, because that was my condition. And it was really interesting. You look at chronic pain and you look at the different pain pathways, you look at the different modalities that exist, and you look at the research on it, on chronic pain. Opioids only trump over cannabinoids in one category, and that is acute pain. Acute pain, opioids are better than cannabinoids, but we're not supposed to be on opioids for longer than 5 to 7 days. So that's number one. Cannabinoids actually are research proven to be superior to all other modalities when it comes to treating neuropathic pain, emotional pain, systemic pain, nociceptive pain. There's all different pain pathways. There was another research article that was done by a group of researchers throughout various countries. And for pain in general, they recommend that everyone start off with CBD. There's a whole protocol in Canna Keys that we look at. And for people that are new, it's starting off with CBD and using CBD. And when you get to 40 milligrams of CBD, then add in a little bit of THC. There's ways of doing it in a way that makes sense for you. I'll give you another story. I love storytelling. I think it's really good. It's really helpful. So my mother was anti-cannabis. She's literally wrote me out of her will and blocked me on Facebook for 2 years when she found out I was using cannabis as medicine. That's why I started my podcast, because I really needed to decrease stigma and share those compelling stories. And it was the story of the nun that actually reached my mom. And my mom has osteoarthritis. She's fallen. She's broken her shoulder. She's torn a rotator cuff. She's got knee injuries. She's an orthopedic mess. And so she's filled with inflammation, and her diet's not that great. I love my mom to death. And so I really wanted her to be able to use this, and she was not for it. So it was Sister Suzanne's story. Sister Suzanne wanted to come on the podcast, wanted to share her story. She came on, shared her story, and I sent it to my mother, who watched it. And it took a while, but when my mom came to me, she goes, "I'm really nervous, but I'm open now." It was that nun that really made me realize that I have nothing to lose. I said, "You're right." Basically, we meet people where they're at, and she was really scared, so I needed her to become really comfortable with just 2 ingredients. We got CBD isolate and we got MCT oil, and we mixed it together, and we made her a topical that she could literally do on her own and put on her skin. And topicals don't get into the bloodstream unless it's a patch that has a special ingredient that pushes it in to systemic circulation. So topicals in general, you cannot get high, you cannot get impaired. It's not going to get into your systemic circulation. So she felt comfortable using the topical, and she says, "Okay, I'm ready for the next step." Okay, so that those same 2 ingredients, Mom. Now I want you to put a little under your tongue and do it sublingually. We have a vein under our tongue. Our mouth is like a sponge. We have receptors in our mouth. So my mom started taking CBD isolate under her tongue, putting it on her skin. She started feeling, okay, I'm not high. I feel okay. All right, it could be better, couldn't it? I go, yeah, it could. Then we decided to go broad spectrum CBD. So broad spectrum CBD is whole plant, 0 THC. She just didn't want the THC at all. I'm like, okay, so now she's doing the topical on the outside, and she's doing broad spectrum CBD a couple of times a day under her tongue. And she's okay. This is okay. I'm not completely pain free, but I'm not scared anymore. And this isn't hurting me, and it's not interacting with anything. So she wanted to go to the next step, which was full spectrum CBD. So full spectrum CBD, she started to do that, got comfortable with that. And then finally, she was ready to try some THC. And so for people that were new, I want to try the chocolate. That's what I want to try. I sent her a chocolate bar, and I told her just to take 1 square. And I said, if you get into trouble, you can take a little extra CBD. If you don't like the way you feel, CBD can soften THC without taking away the medicinal effect. I said, you have enough CBD on board that I think you're going to be fine, but I only want you to eat 1 chocolate square. That was 5 milligrams of THC, which is a very high dose for someone that is very new. So generally, I have people do a little bit lower than that, 2.5 milligrams to start, specifically an older person, but she wanted to feel it. So I wanted her to have that experience. She called me, and she didn't. I said, if you get in trouble, give me a call. And she didn't call me right away. So the next day I called her up and I said, how did it go? And she goes, the chocolate was really good. I said, yeah. And she goes, I eat 3 squares. And I go, that's a lot for you, Mom. And she goes, yeah. And I felt it. And she said, it was wonderful. So this is my mother, who blocked me on Facebook, wrote me out of her will, thought it was the devil's lettuce, is now an advocate for cannabis. And she had an experience. She says, yep, I was high. Yep, I know what it feels like. And yeah, it wasn't so bad. I will never take that much again. But now she knows her dose is 1 square of chocolate. And she'll have a nice elevated experience, but she's not impaired. She just feels different, and she doesn't do it all the time. But it helped her to overcome her own stigma around using cannabis as medicine. And so she made it up for me. She came on my podcast, and she says, I was wrong about all you people, all you stoners. She says, I thought you all were stoners, and I never understood it. Never understood the endocannabinoid system, never understood how cannabis could make me feel good and not be high. So when she said that, I said, okay, Mom, what does it mean to feel good and not be high? She said to me, the pains become background noise. I'm sleeping a lot better. I giggle a little bit more. I'm not so grumpy and mean, and I'm not so depressed about all of my problems. I said, but are you high or impaired? And she says, no, I feel good. I said, thank you, Mom. That's what I needed to hear. When she said that to me, I feel good and I'm not high, that actually gave me an impetus to reframe what that word high means. So in my podcast, I like to say the word high as H is for hope, I is for inspiration, G is for growth, and H is for healing. The first thing that cannabis brings so many patients is hope. Hope that they can have a better day. Hope that they can feel better. Hope that they don't have to take that pill or have that procedure. Hope that they can get up the next day and have a good day and not feel horrible. And then once they have that hope, they're in spirit, inspired, right? Inspiration, and they're open to receiving new information. And once they have that hope and inspiration, they're more apt to change. And growth is an action word, growing in health. And then healing isn't the absence of illness or disease. Healing is truly doing the best you can with what you have in any given moment. And so that's how I like to look at cannabis, is hope, inspiration for growth and healing. My mother was the perfect story to tell about that.
Before we completely close out, for the nurse that wants to start educating themselves now, how can we start doing that?
We have a free network. So if you go to holisticcaring.com, on the very first page, you're going to says join our free network. The network is run by nurses and our pharmacist. We actually have a pharmacist on staff. And in our network, we have a lot of free information. We have a free introductory to cannabis course, free ABCs of CBD. If you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll get a free 7-page medical cannabis guide that you can download. And in our private network is where we also have a lot of live events. We have a plant medicine support group that meets monthly. We do all of our podcasts are in there. We do clinical conversations, and clinical conversations, Nurse Elizabeth and I actually break down a disease or a condition, talk about how conventional care treats it, the limitations of conventional care, how cannabinoids can treat it, and give case studies and examples. And those are available for continuing education credit units. We also have 5 professional programs and 8 patient programs that are all available for nurses for continuing education credit units as well. And then those are paid for courses, and those are also hosted in the network. We have a lot to offer. And then for the other organizations, there's other organizations that are available for people to join. I'm very grateful. I sit on the board of directors of the American Cannabis Nurses Association and the American Cannabis Nurses Association, ACNA. It's cannabisnurses.org. It's also an organization that I strongly advocate for nurses to join. It's a great organization. They also have continuing education credit unit hours, and they are a group of nurses that have come together that are going to be actually taking the scope and standards of nursing and bringing it to the next level, creating an exam for nurses to get board certified.
Thank you so much, Sherri. We're going to be putting all that in our show notes for our listeners, the nurses and the non-listeners. I'm sure they all gained a lot of insight, a lot of education, and a lot of value. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Sherri.
Thank you guys for having me on. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And yeah, anything I can do to change the paradigm of health and to advocate for the safe therapeutic use of cannabis, I'm all for it.
Thanks for joining. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, and share with a friend.
Want to learn more about a specific topic? Follow and drop us a line on Instagram so we can explore it more with you.